This is going to be a quick function and safety check for a Taurus GX4. Anytime you disassemble and then reassemble your firearm or the magazine, it is a good idea to run through a couple of quick checks to make sure all the safeties and functions are working properly. The Taurus manual does not have a specific procedure for this check, so I've taken a lot of these checks from other manufacturers' manuals. You want to make sure you remove the magazine first, lock the slide back to make sure there is no ammunition in the gun or anywhere nearby. The first check is one that you can do before you even completely assemble the gun. So the first check is the firing pin safety check. So this plunger right here is part of a firing pin safety. And what that does is that blocks the firing pin from coming through. You can see it moving in there, but it is not coming through the breech face right here. It's not coming through where it might hit a round that's in the chamber and cause the gun to fire if it were to be dropped. However, if you press down on this plunger and then push forward, then the firing pin comes through. And what happens is when you press the trigger, the internal mechanism presses on this to make sure that you're actually intending to fire the gun. So when this plunger is up like this, you shouldn't be able to push the firing pin through the breech face. If you were to press on that, you should be able to push it through. All right, that's the first check. All right, next we want to check the magazine release. So take the magazine, put it into the gun, and make sure you cannot pull it out unless you press the magazine release. All right, next we want to put an empty magazine in the firearm, and we want to make sure that the slide will lock back when the magazine is empty. So with an empty magazine in the gun, if you rack the slide, it should lock back. And it did. All right, so that is working normally as well. The next thing we want to check is the trigger safety. So the trigger safety is this little lever on the front of the trigger here. So the trigger should not go back unless this is being pressed. That way they're ensuring that there's a finger in here pressing the trigger before the trigger will actually work. So first you want to rack the slide to make sure the striker is cocked. And now we want to grab both sides of the trigger, but not the front, and try to actuate the trigger. It should not work. The trigger shouldn't move very much. And then always pointing the gun in a safe direction, test it the normal way, pressing the trigger safety first, and then pressing the trigger. Make sure you hear that click and the trigger goes all the way back. Next we want to test the trigger reset. So again, rack the slide, so lock the slide back, verify again there's no round in the chamber. Let the slide come forward, and now pointing the gun in a safe direction, as always, press the trigger but hold it back. Now rack the slide again. Now come forward gently until you feel the click of the reset. Once you feel that click, you should be able to press the trigger and hear it again. All right, that is all good to go. If you have a California compliant Taurus GX4, it probably is set up so it won't fire without the magazine inserted. So all the trigger tests might have to be done with the magazine inserted, which is not a problem. You just put the magazine in and repeat those tests. If your firearm has an external thumb safety, which the Taurus GX4 does not even come with as far as I know, and this one does not have a manual thumb safety. If you do have one with a manual thumb safety, rack the slide, put the safety on, try to press the trigger, it should not fire, and then press the safety off, attempt to press the trigger, and it should fire at that point. Another test would be the out of battery test. A semi-automatic firearm should not fire unless the action is completely closed. If something is keeping it from closing all the way and the slide is slightly back like this, the gun should not fire. So rack the slide completely to cock the striker, and then just take it a little bit out of battery, just like that, point it in a safe direction, and try to press the trigger. Nothing should happen. The trigger will move, but it's not actuating the sear, and the striker is not being released. All right, then release it back into full battery again, point it in a safe direction, the gun should fire. The last test that I always do after I reassemble my firearm, and especially if you reassemble a magazine, we want to make sure the magazine is going to feed properly and the firearm is going to extract and eject properly. A good, quick, safe way to check all that is by using some dummy rounds. You don't need to use any live ammo. You don't need to be at the range. So get some snap caps or dummy rounds. I use these A-Zoom ones. These are 9mm. Make sure you get them for the caliber gun that you have. These are completely fake. There's no gunpowder, there's no bullet, there's nothing. It's just a piece of aluminum that looks exactly like a cartridge. Load 5 dummy rounds into a magazine. Insert the dummy rounds into the firearm. Rack the gun. Check to make sure you have 1 dummy round in the chamber, and then you're going to have 4 left in the firearm. We're just going to simulate firing the weapon by racking the slide very briskly. And each time I rack the slide, the gun should extract and eject one of the dummy rounds. And after the 5th round, or however many you have in here, once it's empty, the slide should lock back on the empty magazine. Be aware that the rounds are going to fly across the room, so just expect that to happen. So you want to do it very briskly to make it work. And we're just going to do this. All right, my rounds went everywhere. It locked back on the empty magazine. Looks like the gun is working properly, the magazine's feeding properly, and we are good to go. Thanks for watching the video. If you found it helpful, please hit like below. I'm going to go to the range.